This is Up for a Chat with your hosts, Cindy O'Meara and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Cindy O'Meara.
And I'm Kim Morrison. And boy, are we in for a treat this week. Our very special guest, my brother from another mother, the gorgeous Toby Morrison. What an honor to have you on the show. We are talking a topic and certainly some health things this week around things like ME, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. We want to know more about this. Are they just statements? Are they real? How are people being affected by this? But before we dive into all of the things that you're doing amazingly, Toby, would you mind taking us back? How on earth did you get involved in all of this? And where on earth has your life, your journey taken you?
Hey, thanks for the intro, girls. Appreciate it. Yeah, Kim, we might be related. We might not be. I don't know, but we do share the last name together. So that's kind of cool. My journey started when I was a 16-year-old teenage boy. With the dream of becoming a professional basketball player. And all I really cared about was basketball. I was quite tall. I'm 6'6" now, so almost 2 meters tall. Was pretty athletic, super fit. And to be honest, I hated school. I used to wag a lot of classes and just play basketball on my own. And life changed really fast. I was training with the state team in Victoria for basketball. I was probably training 14 times a week. This is like 18 years ago. And back then there was no education on overtraining. There was definitely no education on nutrition, rest and recovery. Things have changed now, which is good, but back then I was kind of just pushing myself as hard as I possibly could. And whilst I was doing that, I got struck down with glandular fever. And at the time, I kind of just thought it was like a cold or a flu. And, I went to the doctors and the doctor just kind of said, you'll be fine with time. And whilst I was struggling with that, I was kind of sleeping, 16 hours a day. Body was kind of exhausted, lethargic, super, super tired. But I kept pushing myself and I kept playing basketball and I kept getting worse and I didn't know why. And about 3 to 6 months later, after pushing myself so much, my body kind of just collapsed. Combine pushing myself physically too much, probably not supporting myself nutritionally enough, definitely not getting enough rest and sleep. And then added to being a 16-year-old boy, with added stress, being one of the better basketball players, being that go-to person to win games, and a lot of self-pressure. And my brain and body kind of just shut down. And my parents and I went on a journey of figuring out what the hell was wrong with me. And you can imagine back then, it's still pretty bad now, to be honest, finding a diagnosis to an unexplained illness. And so we bounced around Melbourne, Victoria, from specialist to specialist. I felt like I had 100 blood tests over a space of about 6 months. And eventually I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. I went from being one of the fittest kids at school to being one of the most deconditioned kids at school. I lost about 20 kilos of muscle mass. I went from running hours and hours on end to not being able to really lift my head off a pillow and get out of bed and just do daily life stuff. And it was probably one of the hardest periods of my life. But also, I guess God had other plans for me. And basically what had happened was the suffering and pain that I was experiencing back then was so excruciating and so painful. And you can imagine this is almost 2 decades ago when YouTube wasn't really a thing. There was no Instagram or online communities. And I remember one day I was just sitting there just thinking, why me? This is so unfair. I'm a good person. I haven't done anything bad and I don't deserve this. And at the same time, I had this kind of vision of making sure when I get better that no one else would have to go through what I went through alone. And so that vision has taken me on an amazing journey of eventually getting my health and life back, and then studying and learning what it took to get better, and then basically giving back. And we've got a program called the CFS Health Recovery Program. It started offline in a little tiny clinic in Brighton, Melbourne, Australia. Got a bunch of amazing results. Yeah, so had the offline clinic in Melbourne and was fully booked within 6 months. And it got so busy that people were flying all over Australia to come and see me because there was no practical help. And this is the whole reason why I started CFS Health, is because I literally got very, very little help from the medical profession. It was trial and error a million times over. And when I figured out how to get my health back and start recovering, I realized other people needed that practical help too. And so I created the first online recovery program in 2013, which was a comprehensive practical recovery plan for people. And sure enough, within 2 months, we were helping people in 14 countries. And now it's 2023 as we speak, and we are helping people in 56 countries. And we've supported and helped thousands of people get healthy and starting to live again.
You know what I find incredible is, I wrote down some of the things you said. Why me? I'm a good person. I've done nothing bad. Why me? Why me? But obviously the universe did have a very good reason for you to have this, and that was so that you could help. And look at the extent of people that you are now helping. It's incredible. I do have a question about your journey. So what do you think was the moment that, you got the disease? Was there something that happened?
Yeah, I think, and this is a global thing that I've realized now with working with thousands of people, it's usually never just one thing that causes something like chronic fatigue syndrome. It's usually an accumulation of things that, combined, basically the body and the brain can't handle the adaptation. And so for me back then, it was certainly physical stress. I was just, my philosophy was no pain, no gain.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was training 14 times a week. I was playing for 4 different basketball teams, throw in school, throw in, going to bed super late, throw in not eating good quality food and nutrition, and having no awareness of an education around, rest and recovery when it comes to performance. And then throw in a virus like glandular fever, and it's a really good recipe for, something like chronic fatigue syndrome to happen, and this happens a lot with a lot of people we meet. It's usually a combination of things. Now, for some people, it can be emotional stress, and a physical, virus or infection. Now, for others, it can be trauma and pushing themselves physically too much. For other people, it can be an environmental thing like mold or toxicity, add in combined, emotional stress or pressure, basically where the body just can't carry the load anymore. And the brain and the body just decide, you know what, enough's enough. I can't do this anymore.
It's really a quick question. Sorry, Cindy, just before you go there, I just wanted to check in on something. Cindy, were you the same at school? I'd never heard of chronic fatigue syndrome at school, but I do recall a number of people having glandular fever. Could you just explain to us, you say it's a combination of things and all that sort of jazz, but is that the same? Was it the same, that pressures like emotional, trauma, physical, environmental, is that also leading into what glandular fever is? And is it similar?
Is that a question for Cindy or me?
No, for you.
Oh, right. Okay, cool.
I just was wondering whether Cindy had people at school that had chronic fatigue, or was glandular fever even around in her, because she's quite a lot older than me, Toby.
Oh, ouch.
No, it's all good. I'm happy. I'm happy to be the old one here. Like in the 1960s, when I started to go to school in 64, I don't remember it. I seem to remember later on there was glandular fever. Yeah. But I don't remember the amount of young people with the illnesses we see today. And my question was exactly the same as Kim's. Is there seems to be this incredible increase in all diseases, and chronic fatigue is huge.
Yeah, back then they called it kissing disease. Literally, like that's how you would catch glandular fever from the kissing, and whether that's a myth or not, I'm not sure. But Kim, to answer your question, I don't think emotional stress and physiological overtraining is a direct link to getting glandular fever. I think it's separate. I think the difference is the people who look after themselves in that short period of time when they do have glandular fever usually recover and bounce back faster than those people who just kind of treat it like a cold or a flu and push through and keep living the lifestyle that they've been living, which is, detrimental to health and healing. And so for me, they're two separate things. But at the same time, I've met so many people who say, oh, I had glandular fever once. It was horrible, but I got better within 1 to 2 months. Whereas, the people that we meet, and it's not always glandular fever, it can be something else, like COVID, for example. We're helping a lot of people with long COVID right now. And again, that's a viral infection. Yeah. So it's really like that's the starting point, and maybe there were some other things along the road that kind of led them to basically having a diagnosis, which is saying this is the label we're going to give you because we can't pinpoint exactly what's wrong with you, but your symptoms are persisting for a minimum 6 months. In some countries it's 3 months. These are the symptoms that are showing up for you. We've excluded cancer, we've excluded XYZ, and so we're going to give you the diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome or long COVID, and good luck. That's kind of, that's where it stops in the medical system.
It's quite sad that they don't know what to do when this is, a disease that I believe is quite rife, because I hear people saying it all the time. Can you take us through your journey? I know you said you were, going to lots of doctors and did blood tests and things like that. What was the thing that got you back to your life again, getting back better again? What were the things that you did in order to do that?
Yeah, I think, it's horrible when you're that person suffering. And, we've been told since we were born that when you get sick, you go to the doctor, you take the pill and you get better. And it's simply just isn't the truth with things like chronic fatigue syndrome and other chronic illnesses and disease, because it takes a multifaceted approach. Chronic illness affects every area of your life, not just physically. Maybe it is your gut health, maybe it is, the deconditioning of your body, but think about how that affects you emotionally when you can't do what you are so used to being able to do with ease. And so there's a secondary suffering there, which is, secondary depression, secondary anxiety of not being able to do what you want to do. And so it takes a multifaceted approach to really kickstart recovery. And like I said, CFS Health was born out of the pain and suffering that I went through, because I could literally feel the suffering globally in the world when I was going through it. I was just imagining, imagine the millions of people right now who are feeling what I am feeling, and no one's giving them help or direction. And it's not as easy as, some doctors are really well-meaning and have good intention, where they're like, look, there's no pill that you can take to get better, but, just make sure you sleep better and eat better and start exercising. And that can be super insulting and also the wrong advice, depending on where that person's at in their recovery. And it's so hard, if you're sleeping 16 hours a day, you struggle to brush your teeth, you struggle to even sit upright with all the symptoms you're experiencing, to be told to just go and exercise is really hard and overwhelming. And so, that's how CFS Health started, is like to give people a proper plan specific to where they're at, whether they're a 1 out of 10 and they're in bed most of the time, or they're slowly getting better, or they're integrating back into life. There's a different process for different levels of recovery. For me, I went and tried like a million different things, like most people did. I tried acupuncture. I think I was taking like 100 Chinese medicine balls a day. I was getting needles all over the place. I went to psychologists who didn't really understand it and kind of just thought I was making it up. I went to physiotherapists, personal trainers, you name it. And the change happened for me when I went and saw this last person who was like the guru. And he was like a wacky professor. You can imagine he had like a white lab coat, super long gray hair, probably in his 70s. And he was a great person. And, he was one of those people that you had to wait months and months to get into. And so for us as a family, we were holding on to the hope that he was going to fix me. And I remember going to his clinic every single week for about 20 sessions. And the deal was that over time, if I'm doing all these random things that he's getting me to do, that I'm going to get better. And so he'd give me these weird potions, and he'd make herbs up, and then he'd do, lots of muscle testing. I remember one session he was humming. I had to hum "Happy Birthday" while he tapped on my back. And so I'm sitting there going, sick and super unwell, and just going, please God, make this go away. After 20 sessions, yes, I was a little bit more hopeful, and maybe I made slight improvements. And on the 20th session, he said, all right, my boy, you don't have chronic fatigue syndrome anymore. And I remember going, that's weird. I kind of still feel pretty shit. And he gave some great advice, like stop drinking Coca-Cola, like don't eat sugar and things like that. But fundamentally, I didn't really feel much of a difference. And so I said, so does that mean I can run again? And I hadn't ran in like 4 years. And he said, yeah, my boy, you can go and run again now. And so, me being the person that just wanted to run, I went and bought some brand new sneakers and I went for a run. And little did I know that, my body wasn't ready for that. And so I remember running for about 5 minutes, and I basically pulled off to the side of the path and just fell in a heap. And I remember going home, sitting there so upset and crying. And at the same time, having this epiphany, realizing that no one else can fix me but me. I've tried everything. I've literally tried I've tried humming "Happy Birthday" with a freaking Albert Einstein tapping on my back, hoping and wishing and praying that it was going to work. And then realizing I hadn't really taken any responsibility for my own self and my own health. And so that's when my journey began, when I really realized, okay, if it's to be, it's up to me. And so I started devouring through personal development books, mindset books. I used to read a lot of books about reconditioning the body and nutrition. And I was lucky I came across a brilliant doctor called Dr. Lionel Lubitz. And he was the one that said, you can get better. It's about not doing too much, but it's about not doing too little, and you have to find your sweet spot. And so he came with the concept baseline, and I kind of just took it a step further to basically help create stability in your system so that you can regulate where you're at and then progress from where you're at. And so I went on this journey to really rebuild and recondition my entire health. And, that meant a really specific routine and structure. So I'd stop pushing and crashing all the time. A lot of mindset work to accept where I was at, because for 2 years I was a victim of my circumstances. Why me? This is unfair. Look at the life that I'm missing out on. To eventually just accepting where I was at, because without acceptance I couldn't move forwards, right? Like I was just still looking at the past in the rearview mirror, going, wishing and loathing my old life. And accepting where I was at was a huge turning point, and accepting some self-responsibility was huge too. So changing my nutrition plan, reconditioning my body was a huge one. And I was lucky enough to learn from a few mentors and people who didn't specifically work with people with chronic fatigue syndrome, but kind of had a good understanding of holistic health. And from there, I just started to progress, and slowly but surely, little by little, I got better and better and better.
Tell me, sorry, Cindy. We both get so excited.
We do. That's such an amazing journey, and I think it gives people hope. But I think what I really got from that, you had to take responsibility.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this is the hardest part. Obviously we help thousands of people around the world right now. And, we don't accept everyone into our program, because there's some people who want to be fixed. We have a rule we have set boundaries in our program. And one of them is, we can't do the work for you. We can teach you everything we know. We can support you. We'll guide you. We'll keep you accountable. But ultimately, you have to meet us halfway. I can't make you eat the healthy food. I can't make you stay consistent and show up for yourself. That has to come from you within yourself. And so it is a journey. I say to people, it's not like you can click your fingers and go, okay, like I accept this mess and life's going to be good. It's not an easy process. So we literally have a training on every aspect of recovery, even to the point where we have a training on how to accept where you're at, because that's where it starts.
Yes, though, someone listening to this who knows someone with chronic fatigue, or perhaps they themselves are experiencing the symptoms you're talking about, I know we can accept that. I know we can look at responsibility. The problem is, if you don't have a good team around you, if we didn't know about CFS Health, or if we didn't know what we could actually do, or, for many of us, we keep doing what we've always done. We'll keep getting what we've always got.
Yep.
But we don't know what it is we need to change, because we've been told that taking a Barocca to give you a Zoom is the best thing to do, or that you need to. So how do you undo past learnings, or well-meaning individuals saying what you should and shouldn't be doing? I'm just curious how you went from self-responsibility to how do I make the next step, and what's the right step?
Yeah, this is brilliant. So there's kind of two answers to this. The first thing is, I just want anyone to know who's listening that it's not your fault. I think there's this feeling within yourself when you're stuck that, you're blaming yourself, you're beating yourself up. But if you think about it, the system has let you down. Not one individual, but just the culture and the system in general, where the culture and the system says, hey, if you get sick, you come to the doctor and you get the pill and you'll get better. Or, hey, come to the doctor and I'll tell you, you just got to sleep better, eat better, and move well, and start thinking more positively. And, that's a dead end answer. There's nothing that a patient can really do with that information, because it's not practical. And you can imagine when brain fog's persistent, you can't really think straight anyway. Yeah, your immune system's low. You're feeling like crap. Maybe there's some secondary anxiety and depression that's coming with what you're experiencing. It's extremely hard to get started. But I would say the first thing is, acceptance isn't resignation. And a lot of people that we work with, originally, when they come in, they literally feel like, oh my God, I can't accept where I'm at because it's really bad and I don't want it to be like that. And we say, hey, no, acceptance isn't resignation. Acceptance is the starting point of change. And as soon as you can accept where you're at, you have 2 feet on the ground right now, and you can start to make changes now. The second thing I'll add to that, which is like, well, how do I know what to do? At CFS Health, we've seen time and time again, there's 3 stages to recovery. The first stage is the acute stage. And this is where maybe it's really recent, where you're experiencing an onset of symptoms, like the brain fog, muscle aches and pains, lethargy, dizziness, cognitive issues, muscle spasms. Like, there's literally headaches. There's so many that I can't list right now, but you get the picture of where you're suffering. And in the acute stage, it's actually a lot about doing less than doing more. It's about pulling yourself back and really creating stability and regulating your entire system, so we can have a bit of a foundation to build on. In the acute stage, it's very important we have a protocol, which is like the less is more protocol. And it's just initially. So it's like, one of the common things that people experience with something like chronic fatigue syndrome or other chronic conditions is this yo-yo effect of the push and crash cycle. So, as soon as they feel good for the morning, when they wake up, they're like, oh my God, I haven't felt this good in weeks. They go and do the 100 things on their to-do list that they had banked up over the weeks before. And of course, the body can't handle that amount of load and adaptation. And so the body breaks down, and then you feel like absolute crap. We call it the valley of death at CFS Health, where you push yourself, you feel great, you go, yes, I'm amazing, I'm superwoman or superman. And then 1 to 3 days later, you're in bed and you feel like absolute crap. And so we need to avoid the push crash cycle. This is where we bring in the baseline, which is about really being able to do what you can currently do without feeling any worse than you currently feel. And so there's a framework and a teaching. We actually have a free teaching on this that anyone can download called cfshealth.com/baseline. But it's really about creating stability first. The second stage is this tight and wide stage where it's more about re-strengthening. And in this re-strengthen stage, so we've got restore, re-strengthen, and reintegrate. So stage 2 is where your energy levels start to stabilize. The pushing and crashing has stopped, and now there is a little bit of energy in the system where we can start to recondition and rebuild the brain and the body. When I say brain, I mean cognitive and emotional. Things like reading, just using your brain, day-to-day life stuff. And then emotional is having that emotional stability. Maybe it's getting better with boundaries. Maybe it's getting better with how you live your life. And then physically, it's about reconditioning your body and re-strengthening your body appropriately. Once you've mastered that, and it is a process, and by the way, there's gray areas in between each stage. So it's not as like a fix, like once you do stage 1, then you're in stage 2. You could be bouncing between 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, depending on where you're at. And stage 3 is all about integration. And so inside our program, we have an up-level program called the Lifestyle Integration Program, where we help support our members as they get healthier. Because here's the problem. When you've been struggling with chronic fatigue syndrome or the like for a long time, you don't know how to live life. And if you've been suffering for a long time, you kind of have this idealism of like, oh, life is just going to be perfect when I get better. Like you look at everyone on the outside world and you go, they've just got it so good. And you haven't dealt with life stress for a while. And you think, oh my God, Kim Morrison, like she must just like wake up feeling amazing every day. Like she never gets tired. She never gets stressed. Cindy, oh my God, Cindy's life's a dream every second of the day. And little do they know that with life comes life challenges. And so we help support our members through the lifestyle integration period where we encourage them to stop focusing on their recovery. We don't want people to focus on their recovery forever because that means they're still sick. So we want to get people to the point where they have the body wisdom to know what to do and when to do it. And they know what works for them so that they can kind of make that a habit and make it unconscious. So it's just so, it's you just wake up and you know what to eat, you know what to do, you know how to move, you know how to sleep, you know what works for you. And then we can start to focus on life, which is, well, what are my values? What is my North Star? What is my why? What do I want to do with this world of mine? And what does the next steps look like to progress towards that? So we're pretty big on vision. And we have, like I said, we have a whole separate program called the Values Aligned Program, which is about helping people get really clear on what's important to them now. And what we often find is that it's not what it was when they first got sick. Their life completely changed. Their values system changes. And what was once important doesn't really matter anymore.
Interesting that values change when you've been through a sickness like that. I want to ask you about prevention. Now, I know nobody expects to get sick, and they might not be, thinking about prevention. But I guess where this is coming from is I read a book called Plague by Judy Mikovits, who worked with chronic fatigue in the US with a big family. The family was very wealthy and the daughter got chronic fatigue, and they set up a foundation. And Judy went in to work with them and started to see a virus as opposed to Epstein-Barr, which is what I think CFS is associated with. But she started to see another virus and traced that virus back. Have you read her work? Do you know anything about it? And if not, then what would you think we need to do in order to prevent this happening to us? And I understand you probably already said it with, you were overwhelmed, you did lots of exercise, you didn't check out, you didn't check yourself, and maybe you weren't eating as well, especially when I heard you drank Coca-Cola. That. But I just
guilty.
I just want to know. Though maybe answer to two of them. Have you read Judy Mikovits' work? And secondly, what would you say to a young person who's burning the candle at both ends as far as their prevention would be?
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, no, I haven't actually read any of her work. I've heard of her name, but it sounds like she's doing great work.
Mm.
And it's funny you asked that question. I was just at a business conference with some of the most brilliant minds and business leaders in Australia. And I sat down with one of them for dinner, and I look up to him a lot. He's an incredible guy. I'm not going to name his name, but we got chatting and he was asking about my work and he was fascinated. And he said, and he, all of a sudden he kind of went to himself. He's like, well, how, would I get chronic fatigue syndrome? Like, could I get it? And he's like, how could I prevent it? He's that type of that high performer that's already thinking about himself of like making sure that he's on track. And I said, well, and we were previously talking about his routine and his rhythm and what he does with his nutrition and sleep. And I said, to be honest, I don't think you'll ever get chronic fatigue syndrome because you have this body awareness and body wisdom that you know what works for you. And when you get those cues where you might be overtired, you might be burnt out, you might be feeling just not yourself, you go back and fall into your rhythm and routine that suits you. And for him, it's, a set bedtime, a set wake time. It's maybe, taking off the stress and pressure off work. It's different for everybody, but there are some common frameworks and I guess routines and structures that you put in place to support yourself, which in turn, really what I'm talking about is regulating your nervous system, nourishing your mind, nourishing your body, and ultimately just looking after yourself. I think we do live in such a fast-paced world. And like I said before, the culture has let you down. The culture says grind, hustle, push, sleep when you're dead. And, it's kind of, we need to do the opposite of that. It's like, we need to make sure that we're doing what's appropriate for us based off where we're at and what's going on in our lives. I kind of liken it to like a relationship breakup. It's absolutely horrible. And many of our clients, are in relationships and many of them have had breakups and they go, oh my God, like I feel absolutely terrible and I don't know what to do. And I say, hey, healthy people feel terrible too when they go through a breakup, and healthy people support themselves through that too. So, it's important just to keep in mind, well, what would a healthy person do and respond to a stressful period or situation?
I know that you are working with clients that have the problem, but have you considered working with clients, no, not clients, but working to help them with what you've just talked about then? Are you doing that as well? I know I'm pushing you because I know you've got all the stuff that you are doing, but I'm listening to you, Toby, and I'm thinking you're a young man, and you would inspire a lot of young people to listen to you. So are you working with those types of people as well, not just the people that have gotten sick?
Not consciously. I think there's just such a demand right now. We literally get like thousands on top of thousands of requests and applications every single year with people who are in need, like they're actually in need of the help. But it's a good question, and it's something that as a team, we'll ponder and figure out how can we get this message out there to people who are, I guess, more health conscious and want to prevent, just like that high performer I talked about the other day that I met and had dinner with. It was a fascinating conversation to install that confidence and that understanding within the self to know what to do and when to do it is pretty important. And to be honest, Cindy, I would just love this information in every single doctor's hands around the world, every single GP, to have literally a 3-page PDF on just some practical things that they could give these people versus saying, there's nothing you can do to get better, or just think more positively, or sweat it out, or push yourself more. Like, that's my wish, is to make sure that no one else has to just like suffer unnecessarily. And
it's also, I think it needs to be in the education system. I just feel that education at the moment is worthless. in what we're learning. We're not learning these amazing life skills that you're talking about. It's almost like you need to create, sorry, Toby, but you need to create an education program that teaches these young men and women I think you said self-regulating, and that's what it is. It is self-regulating. And then we might find that less and less people do alcohol, less and less people do drugs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great, I love it. It's a great thought. And yeah, I never thought of it like that. But I guess there are a lot of people who need this kind of education, and you're preaching to the choir, like if I had kids now, I don't know if I'd take them to school. I just don't know. Like it's memory retention stuff. It's not really teaching them life skills. And I just think they don't teach enough about personal development. They don't teach enough about they teach maths, but where do you do algebra in a business? Like teach me how to teach me about tax, teach me how to invest in a property, teach me how to, become useful and valuable in society versus just retention of memory. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir there.
Yeah. And hopefully that education will start to change, or I'm finding more and more people in private education that are starting to change. So I have another question for you. So let's say we have a young man that is very sick, has read everything, and is gung-ho on following a protocol that might be making him worse, but believes that he's read the book and he believes that this will be the best thing for him. And he keeps losing weight and he's not getting better. How do you get, I'm in this situation at the moment. How do you get them? Do they get to the point where it's not working and they'll go try something else? Or do you think that they'll just give up? Because I know that, people are worried when people get into situations like this. How do you get them to maybe at least look at your program and see what you're doing? Is there, or is it just, you just can't help people, everyone?
Yeah. And it's not just young people, there's like mum. We just did an interview this morning with a single mother who's 44, who 2 years ago was basically in a wheelchair. And now 2 years later, she's a fully functioning mum taking her daughter around the world traveling. So it doesn't just affect young people. And so I know a lot of people listening are probably experiencing what you're just saying, Cindy, where they're trying so hard, and one of the things, funnily enough, about recovery is it's actually not about trying hard. That's part of the problem. And even in this, we call it the Spotlight Coaching Session, where we bring on a success story every month, and they'll share a specific thing about their recovery that helped them the most. And this lady this morning literally said, she's like, I was trying so hard to get everything perfect that was one of the things that I needed to fix in order to get better, which was to stop trying so hard. And so it's not what you do, but it's how you do it. It's how you go about it. And so, whether it's a rabbit hole of doing a really, really strict diet, or maybe a movement routine, or some form of mindset work, I guess my invitation and offer to anyone doing that is, how's it working out for you? I think that's the most, important question to ask. One of the things that we say is, keep doing what works and stop doing what doesn't. And whether you're on a vegan diet, when we see this all the time. In fact, the lady that did the success story this morning, she said, I was vegetarian for like 2 years. And when I joined the program, I started to eat animal protein in my nutrition plan, and it made an enormous difference. And so I said to everyone on the call that, when I'm not telling you to stop being a vegan or a vegetarian, or even someone who eats meat, what I'm asking you is to question, how's it working out for you? Is what you're doing working? If it is, it should be giving you some good results. If it's not, it's probably time to change it. And maybe it's just time to change your approach. This all or nothing mindset. And you can't blame them, Cindy. Like, these guys, they're overcompensating from the point of losing their current life. And so we know that nothing great comes from desperation, but at the same time, we have to say, hey, I understand why you're doing it, because you feel like you've missed out on so much of life already. And so you're overcompensating and trying really hard to catch up, but ultimately it's making you feel worse.
Yeah, and me being a nutritionist and focusing on the food side of everything,
Yeah.
Everything's got a food value, or it's always about that. I remember Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride saying, sometimes when the body is lacking in nutrients, and especially in animal proteins, you can't reason with that person as well as somebody whose brain is actually working well. And you've been talking about this a lot, that in chronic fatigue or CFS, the brain's not working. And that's what's hard, is you want that brain to work, but you can't make it work because they're going into one direction and not maybe the direction that their brain needs. And I'm talking about the chemicals needed for the brain, not the emotions that are needed for the brain. And I know what those chemicals are, and the importance of those chemicals, and the importance of the nutrients that are given to us by, I'm sorry to say, but meat products.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I cannot condone a vegan diet. I just can't, because
we
I
haven't
know
seen it be useful in our program.
Yeah.
Can I just say something for the people who are listening, who are carers or parents or loved ones of the person suffering?
Yes, please do.
Is that okay?
Yes.
So first of all, my heart goes out to you. It is so freaking hard what you're going through. In fact, it's an own journey in itself. And I think it's really important to give yourself permission to not be okay, and to acknowledge that it's not easy for you either. I got two things for you. The first thing is, get help and support for you. And that might be through a counselor, it might be through a psychologist, a coach, maybe even a friend, but get outside help and support for you whilst you're supporting this person in front of you. The second thing is, try not to put your suffering onto them. And I know you would never do that, with intention, but you coming home, or you coming into their room and crying in front of them, or, telling them how hard it is, and kind of, showing all that emotion, unconsciously puts a lot of pressure on the person suffering. They already feel guilty for the whole situation. And so if you need to cry, just cry outside of the vicinity of where they're at. If you need to get angry, if you need to get frustrated, do it, but just not in front of them. We've seen such a healing, profound effect just from that alone, where you're separating that, emotional struggle that you're experiencing with the person who's actually experiencing firsthand the actual chronic fatigue syndrome suffering. The second thing that I would say, and this is really hard, is to allow them to have their experience. What you say to them is probably right. Maybe they do need to relax a little bit more. Maybe they do need to let go and stop trying so hard. Maybe they do need to eat healthier. Maybe they do need to think a little bit more positively than they are and stop being a victim, potentially. But it's a little bit like when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And by you kind of saying, come on, like, you need to eat healthier, or come on, like, don't watch that garbage, or come on, go to bed earlier, it's only adding in more stress and pressure. And so again, it's really hard when you don't have a program or a plan in place, but even just the allowance of them, what you can do if you want is say, hey, oh, wow, I listened to this podcast and I thought it was really fascinating. I'll send you the link, but, if you want to listen to it, go for it. That's a better way to do it than you've got to do this program, you've got to try this, you've got to try that, because it's like, well, the person hasn't even enrolled themselves yet. And I think it's just important that, like, not to rush it and to allow that person to have their own experience. And sometimes you do need to go to rock bottom. Sometimes you need to go down that void of whatever you think you need to do and it not working, to then make you realize and have the epiphany that you maybe just need a different approach. and maybe you need a holistic approach. And to be honest, Cindy, our program's amazing and it gets amazing results, but I also don't believe that you need a program to get better. I got better. I didn't have a set program. I had support. I had an amazing family. I had some great mentors, but I just don't want people to feel disheartened that if they're not doing a set program that they can't get better. I think, there's a lot of people out there now who are taking advantage of people, and they're saying, if you don't do my program, you're not going to get better. Well, I think that's bullshit. That's self-interest and that's marketing. There's so much great free information. I know Cindy and Kim, you guys provide really good info on just general health and well-being too. And so it's up to the individual to, take the steering wheel. We say to our clients, we're gonna give you the keys, and we're going to give you the car too, but it's up to you if you pick up the keys and put the keys in the ignition to start your car to move you forwards to where you want to go.
So powerful, especially there seems to be so much of this, and perhaps a lot of people don't even realize they have this condition. They just cannot get over the brain fog, the feeling of constantly feeling tired. I want to come at you I know we've used up a lot of your time, but from a spiritual element, one of the things you said at the very beginning was, I questioned why me. And I'm just interested why some people get this and are affected by it and others aren't. Do you think there's a spiritual side to this, a calling, it's written in the stars and it's what you're going to do with that? Why do some people get it and some don't? And then when you ask the question, why me? How did you turn that into why not me?
Yeah. I think the reason why some people do get it and some people don't get it is their constitution of health at that point of time. Like I said, there's lots of people who get glandular fever and within 2 months they're totally back to normal because they rest and they listen to their body, and then they kind of get back to living. And other people, it's usually accumulation of not just one thing but maybe 3 things or more that spirals them down into something like chronic fatigue syndrome, etc. And to answer your question about spirituality, this might be a little bit controversial, and I often don't speak about it too much. It usually comes up in our lifestyle integration calls, actually, for our members. I believe everything happens for a reason, and I do believe in some instances that chronic fatigue syndrome is a sign that you're not living or being authentic to yourself. And what I mean by that is that you're living someone else's dream, that maybe you're not really grounded in who you are. And again, you're chasing something outside of yourself or an ego-driven sense of accomplishment that actually isn't that fulfilling. And so it can be really tiring when you're running someone else's race. And we often hear that from clients where, their parents said, you have to be a lawyer. You have to become a doctor. You have to become a scientist. You have to get great, perfect grades at school. And that type of perfectionism and, ladder climbing is pretty soul destroying in many cases. And this is not for all. I'm not saying this is a blanket statement as, yes, you got chronic fatigue syndrome because you're not living your authentic self and your authentic life. But for many people, it is a coming home to yourself. And Kim, often a lot of people, as they start to get better, they actually become really thankful for the illness and what it gave them. And it's so profound when that happens, because all of a sudden, they're thankful for the experience. They've taken the lessons and the messages from it, and they've applied what they needed to apply, and now they're out the other end as well. And so, there's just so many success stories. We've got a bunch on our YouTube channel, on our podcast, where a lot of them have expressed that this spiritual, I guess, unbecoming to becoming. In fact, one of our past members, she got better and actually published a book called The Unbecoming, which was, letting go of her old self and becoming this new self. And Lauren Giammarco, I think it's called The Unbecoming, and she's just an amazing, I guess, case study of what you're talking about.
Well, I think you're incredible, and I'm amazed, and I'm just so grateful that I now have somewhere to send people when they're in this state. And I just want to thank you for taking one for the team and for also being a trailblazer in this realm. Final word from you, beautiful Cindy. I'm just so grateful to have heard this gorgeous soul. And also, I'd love to know how people can get in touch with you.
So thank you, Toby. I've known you for years. I've watched your journey. I think it's incredible. You're a local on the coast, although I did hear you were flitting all over the place there for a while. So thank you, as Kim said, taking one for the team. I've seen so many people who have done this and gone and done great things to help other people get well. So thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, please let everybody know how they can find you on your socials and as well as your website.
Yeah, my pleasure. Couple of things. Go to the website, cfshealth.com. If you want direct help with myself and my team, and we have, specialists in every area of recovery, from movement to nutrition to mindset to integrative, medical work. We kind of cover everything. So now you can apply for the program there. I'd honestly just encourage you to start with our free resources. We've got a bunch of amazing trainings that, to be honest, if I had when I was sick, I would have paid money for it, and they're free for you. So I'd honestly start there. You can see it on the website. And I'd also go over to our YouTube channel, CFS Health, and just, there's like hundreds and hundreds of free videos that talk about all this stuff on a deeper level. And then, of course, Instagram, CFS Health, and Facebook the same.
Well, that makes it easy. CFS Health.
Yeah.
And that's
Health.
C for chronic, F for fatigue, S for syndrome, health, just so everybody
Well,
gets that.
Ironically, yeah, it is CFS Health, but it stands for Choice, Freedom, Success.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah. So a lot of people, so CFS Health started because ultimately, it's chronic fatigue syndrome can stand for choice, freedom, success. And, it starts with the choice. From that choice creates freedom, and from freedom creates the success. And success is, I guess, just being true to yourself and living a life that you want to live.
Just having someone in your corner, Toby, that's what's so powerful about this. So many diseases these days are so confusing for the poor person and the carers, as you mentioned, going through it. And just to have a support network and the skills and the resources. And as you also said, it may not be for everybody, but wow, just again, on behalf of Cindy and I, congratulations for setting this up, because you're giving people a place to go when they feel like there's nowhere else to be.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, girls.
Thank you.